I used to think love was mostly about rhythm, not fireworks, not lust, not the drama people chase in their 20s, but rhythm. The kind you build over years, through meals cooked in silence, shared glances across a room when the kids say something ridiculous, or the soft touch of her hand when you're both half asleep and she reaches for you without thinking. That was the kind of love I thought Lena and I had. 25 years, two adult kids, a house we finished paying off 12 years ago, matching garden gloves, Friday night rotisserie chicken, mornings where I'd pour her coffee before she even stepped into the kitchen. I'm not saying everything was perfect. It wasn't. But it was ours dash. Predictable, maybe, but there's a strange kind of safety in predictability that you can't explain to someone who's still out chasing highs. We'd been through the storms, deaths, a miscarriage back in '03, and came out the other side. Older, quieter, but still there. Together. So when Lena looked at me across the breakfast table that Tuesday morning, with that half smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said, "I've been thinking I might take a trip soon just for me." I didn't register the shift. Not at first. I thought maybe she meant a weekend with her sister in Phoenix. Or one of those yoga retreats she'd mentioned in passing years ago, the ones I half listened to while scrolling on my phone. I nodded, poured more coffee into her mug, and said something dumb like, "That sounds good. You deserve it." She smiled again. That polite, distant kind of smile you give to strangers who hold the elevator door. Something in me twitched then. Just a little. A blink of unease I quickly buried under the noise of the dishwasher and the clinking of cereal bowls. That week passed like any other. I went to the hardware store twice. The gutters were clogged again, damn maple trees getting out of hand. Lena was quieter, but I figure maybe she was tired. She's always been the more introspective one anyway, more prone to long silences and late-night journaling. We watched our Thursday night show, some British crime drama she liked. She rested her head on my shoulder, but it felt lighter than usual, like she was only halfway there. Saturday afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch with a legal pad in her lap. Not her journal, a legal pad, the kind she used when we planned our move to this house, or when we were budgeting for Janelle's college. I asked her what she was writing. She said, "Just sorting through some thoughts." I offered to go grab us sandwiches from Donnelly's. She smiled, again that same off-center smile, and said, "You always take care of me, Dan." That's when the twitch came back. This time I didn't ignore it. Sunday evening, I stood in the garage, pretending to organize the tool shelf. I wasn't. I was avoiding her. Because something about the way she'd been moving through the house all week, gently, as if trying not to disturb anything, felt wrong. Lena wasn't a ghost. She was vibrant, earthy. She laughed with her whole chest. She snored sometimes. She yelled at the TV when football refs made bad calls. She cried during those soldier reunion videos. But this version of her? This drifting Lena? She was someone else. I kept trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. That maybe it was menopause, or a midlife funk, or just boredom with retirement creeping in. Still, when she came out to the garage that night and leaned against the doorframe, arms folded like she was bracing for something, I knew before she said anything. She looked at me like a woman trying to ease a pain she's about to cause. And then she said, softly, "Dan, I need to talk to you. Can we sit down for a minute?" That was the moment everything shifted. And yet, I had no idea how far it would all unravel. Not yet. Lena sat across from me on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl about to recite something rehearsed. I remember thinking how strange it was that she didn't sit beside me like she normally did. We'd always sat side by side, close, familiar. But this time she chose the armchair across the rug. The space between us wasn't just physical. It was a warning. She exhaled before she spoke. That long, loaded kind of breath people take when they're about to unburden themselves at someone else's expense. "I've been feeling lost lately," she said, not meeting my eyes. There it was. The first code. Dash, I feel lost. I nodded, unsure what to say. "Okay," I offered gently. "What kind of lost?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Just like I don't know who I am anymore." Another code phrase. Dash, I don't know who I am anymore. I'd later come to understand these words not as confessions, but as permission slips dash. Sentences women say when their minds are already made up, but they still want you to believe you're part of the decision. At the time, though, I didn't recognize the pattern. I just saw my wife looking tired, worn out. I thought maybe it was hormonal, maybe it was post-retirement restlessness. So I reached out, tried to place my hand over hers, but she drew them back like they were too fragile to touch. I've been thinking about doing something for myself, she said. Something just for me. That word again. Me. Not we, not us. Me. What kind of something? I asked. Lena stared down at her hands. Maybe travel. Maybe a retreat. There's this women's place in Oregon. It's about self-discovery, silence, reconnecting with your inner voice. I blinked. Lena hated silence. She'd once told me she fell in love with me because I made her laugh when she couldn't sleep. But now she was chasing silence? How long would you go? I asked. She shrugged. A few weeks. Maybe more. I looked at her for a long time. Is this about us? She paused. No, she said. It's about me. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. The next morning, I noticed her phone was always face down. She kept getting texts while we were watching TV. Quick, silent buzzes she'd glance at, smile faintly, then put away. While I walked by her study that evening, I saw her on a video call. She closed the laptop so fast, it almost made a sound. And then, I heard something that nearly knocked the breath out of me. A laugh. Not just any laugh, that laugh. The one she used to give me when we were first dating. The laugh that made me want to marry her. It came out of her mouth like it hadn't visited in years. And it wasn't meant for me. That night, I laid in bed beside her, wide awake, while she turned her back to me, breathing softly. I watched the glow of her screen reflecting off the bedroom wall. She was texting again. I didn't ask. I didn't want the lie. Not yet. By the end of that week, she said she'd booked her trip. I leave next Friday, she said casually over dinner, like she was announcing a dentist appointment. Miles and Janelle were coming over Sunday. She hadn't told them yet. You sure this is what you want? I asked. She nodded. It's just a reset. I'm not leaving you. But she already had. Not in body, but in spirit, in energy, in that quiet, tragic way people exit slowly so they can tell themselves they didn't really abandon anything. On Sunday, our daughter Janelle noticed immediately. Mom, are you okay? She asked, hugging her. You've been kind of off. Lena waved her off. I'm just doing some soul searching. Another code. I watched Miles exchange a look with me. One of those subtle, intuitive glances that said, what's going on? Later, as I cleared the dishes, Lena was upstairs on the phone. I picked up her folded napkin from the table and noticed something written on it in her looping handwriting. Probably a grocery list, I thought. But it wasn't. It was a phrase. You only live once. If not now, when? I stared at it for a long time. She wasn't writing grocery lists anymore. She was writing her way out of this life. Our life. That night, I sat alone in the garage again, holding a socket wrench I didn't need, thinking about how many little clues I'd ignored. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can start disappearing from your life right in front of you, and you convince yourself they're just going through a phase. But Lena wasn't going through a phase. She was heading somewhere I couldn't follow, and I hadn't even begun to understand how far she was already gone. It was Tuesday night when I finally let myself open her laptop. Not something I'm proud of, but marriage is built on trust, and when trust begins to feel like blindfolded loyalty, sometimes desperation takes over. She'd left it open on the kitchen table, screen dark, lid barely ajar. Lena had always been careful with her things, tucked away, zipped up, logged out. But that day, she didn't shut it, didn't clear the tabs. She was either getting sloppy or she wanted to be found. The screen blinked awake with a soft hum. Her email was open. I hadn't meant to look. I really hadn't. But the subject lines felt like sirens calling out through the quiet. Last night was beautiful. I keep thinking about what you said. When you speak, I feel seen. They weren't mine. One name stood out at the bottom of them all. A repeat sender, Gavin T. I clicked the first one before I could stop myself. Dash, the way you describe your mornings made me wish I was there, drinking coffee across from you. I imagine your voice, how you laugh when you talk about the birds outside your window. You make the ordinary sound sacred. You have no idea what that means to me. I kept reading. There were 23 emails. 23 conversations where Lena unraveled her heart to a stranger. Little snapshots of her inner world I didn't even know existed. Paragraphs of poetry, fragments of sadness, deep dives into her dreams and fears. Things she hadn't shared with me in years. And Gavin? He wrote like a man who didn't have to deal with trash days, leaky sinks, or the sharp way Lena snapped when she was tired. He responded with verses. Quotes from Rumi. He told her she was ethereal. that her words stayed with him for days, that he found her mind intoxicating. He was everything I wasn't, not because he was better, but because he didn't live in the same reality. He was the man on the other side of the screen, a clean slate, a fantasy with good spelling and no flaws, a curated version of a lover. Lena had fallen in love with someone she'd never met in person. Or, at least, that's what I thought at the time. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I poured her coffee. She smiled, said thank you, like she always did, but I couldn't unsee what I saw. I couldn't unfeel the betrayal of knowing she was sharing her soul with someone who didn't know how she liked her toast. Someone who'd never held her when she cried after her mother passed. Someone who'd never danced with her in the garage to Al Green on a Saturday afternoon. I watched her sit there, barefoot, scrolling through her phone, her pinky absent-mindedly tapping against the mug the way it always did. And I wondered, when did I stop being enough? Was it when I stopped asking how her day was? When I forgot her favorite author? When I missed her cues, those silent requests for attention she never voiced out loud? Or had I never really known how deep her loneliness went? I didn't bring it up for 3 more days. I needed time, not just to process, but to cool the storm inside me. Rage is easy. It arrives like thunder. But hurt sits quietly, sips your coffee, and follows you into every room of the house. It was Friday evening when I finally asked, Lena, who's Gavin? She froze. Mid-step, right there in the hallway between the kitchen and the bedroom. She didn't lie. She didn't ask Dash, what do you mean? Or would try to spin it. She just turned to me, eyes wide and exhausted, and said, I was going to tell you after the retreat. A retreat. That's what she'd been calling it. Turns out the retreat wasn't just a women's self-discovery getaway. It was also Gavin City. I just needed to see if what I'm feeling is real, she said. What are you feeling? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said something that cut deeper than anything else she could have said. Alive. Alive. As if everything we'd built together was the opposite of that. As if the life I helped her carry, the dreams we shared, the home we built, the children we raised, were somehow dead. Dash. I stood there, stunned. Not angry, just hollowed out. As if someone had scooped the air from my lungs and left nothing behind but silence. Are you in love with him? I asked. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That night, I slept on the couch, even though she didn't ask me to. The living room felt colder than usual. Or maybe I just noticed the cold more, now that the woman I thought I knew had turned into a stranger. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I thought about the first time we kissed, the first time she cried in front of me, the way she used to tuck her feet under my legs when we watched movies. I wondered if Gavin knew any of those things. I wondered if he ever would. I wondered if she wanted him to. And most painfully, I wondered if she thought she deserved more than the life we had. If maybe she was right. For the first time in 21 years, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I say that not in jest, but because when a man builds his life around routine, work, bills, coffee mugs on the same hooks, a coat over the same chair, the same woman asleep in the same bed, it creates a rhythm. And when that rhythm fractures, when one part of the machine breaks down, the rest doesn't know what to do. Lena said she felt alive. And me? I felt like a ghost. A leftover. The background of my own life. She didn't leave that night. She didn't storm out or slam the door or pack a suitcase. That would have been too dramatic for Lena. No, instead, she did something worse. She stayed. But not as my wife. Not as my partner. She stayed as someone waiting. Waiting to feel something again. Waiting to see if Gavin City would awaken whatever had died. Waiting to decide if I was worth holding on to. And I had to live in the same house with that version of her. The next few days passed like smoke. You see them, but you can't grasp them. Lena moved through the house, quietly, like someone visiting a place they used to live. She did her part, made meals, fed the dog, paid the bills. But her smile never reached her eyes. Her laugh, once a real thing that curled out of her throat without hesitation, was now tight and measured. She texted less. Even the kids noticed. One evening, our youngest daughter Mia asked if something was wrong. Mom's just tired, I told her. A lie I told her. A lie I told myself. But Lena wasn't tired. She was checked out. At dinner, I watched her stare at her phone under the table. I didn't have to ask who she was talking to. I knew. You can always tell. There's a certain softness in a woman's face when she's falling for someone. Even if it's quiet, even if it's subtle, there's a shine, a warmth, a breath she holds without knowing it. I used to be the reason for that look. Now I watched her give it to someone whose hands had never wiped her tears. A man who'd never stood beside her during a parent-teacher meeting or held her hair when she had the flu. A man who lived in the safety of her imagination. And that's when I realized I wasn't just being replaced by another man. I was being replaced by a version of love that didn't exist, because Gavin, whoever he was, could be anything she wanted him to be. He didn't disappoint. He didn't forget. He didn't get angry. He didn't sigh too loud or forget to bring home almond milk. He was a blank canvas, and she painted him with all the colors I had faded in her mind. One night, I found myself standing in our closet, just staring at her side of the wardrobe. It was this weird, quiet grief, looking at someone's clothes and wondering if they'd still be hanging there in a month. Wondering if the dress she wore on our 10th anniversary would still belong to this house. Wondering if the scent of her shampoo on the pillow would still make me ache. That same night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon. I listened to the wind move through the trees and thought about what it means to be a man in a marriage that's bleeding out. People think it's loud. They think it ends with shouting matches, thrown plates, slammed doors. But most of the time, it's silent. It's sitting across from the woman you love while she's a million miles away. It's sharing a bed but not a heart. It's feeling her presence and absence at the same time. You lose her slowly. You lose her in unanswered questions, in the way she starts wearing new perfume, in the way she smiles at her phone, in the way she stops asking about your day. And when you finally realize she's gone, it's not the moment she leaves the house. It's the moment you stop recognizing the woman standing in your kitchen. I started to write her a letter, not a dramatic one, just something to remind her of who we were, of what we built, of the time we stood in the rain, laughing so hard we forgot the groceries in the trunk, of the time she held my hand while I cried over my dad's death, of the way she looked at me the night Mia was born, terrified and strong at the same time. But I couldn't finish it, because I didn't know who I was writing to anymore. The woman I remembered, she had already gone. The woman in our house now, she wasn't reading love letters. She was waiting for a plane ticket to a new life. And I was just the man she used to love. The hardest part isn't watching someone walk out the front door. It's watching them stay and leave anyway. Lena hadn't packed a bag. She hadn't shouted, blamed, or stormed off in a dramatic whirlwind like in the movies. No, she was still here, still making her coffee in the morning, still putting on her work heels in the hallway, still folding towels in that same methodical way, 2 long folds, 1 short, 1 stack. And yet, she was disappearing. Not all at once. Not even noticeably at first. But I felt it. At first, it was the silence. We used to talk every night before bed. About our day. About the kids. About nonsense. Sometimes I'd tell her the dumbest things just to hear her laugh. But the silence started showing up between our sentences like a third person in the room. She'd lie next to me, scrolling her phone, her screen glowing against the pillow. I'd say something, and she'd nod without looking up. Or worse, she'd say, "What?" Like she hadn't heard me at all. And when she did look up, it was always half-hearted, as if seeing me pulled her back from somewhere else she'd rather be. I wasn't jealous of Gavin. I was jealous of the part of Lena he now had access to, the part of her that used to be mine. I started keeping track of her phone habits. Not like a madman, not like I was trying to trap her. But when someone you love starts building a secret world, it's impossible not to notice. I'd hear her notifications buzz late at night. I'd see her smile down at the screen, just faintly, in a way she never smiled at me anymore. Her phone was always face down now. She used to be careless with it, leaving it unlocked, letting it ring freely. Now it was password protected and never left her side. Even when she showered, she took it with her. And it's funny, the way your heart adapts to betrayal. Not outright betrayal, but the kind that simmers in the background. You start bracing yourself for the things you don't want to know. One night, I made dinner. She came home late, again. Said she had a late client call. I knew better. I had a friend who still worked in her office. I knew the building locked up at 7. Still, I set the table anyway. Lit a candle. Played music. Quiet jazz like we used to listen to when we were younger. She walked in, paused, and gave me a tight smile. You didn't have to do all this. But I did. Because I was fighting for something that was already fading. Because I was still here. She barely touched the food. She said she was tired. That she'd already grabbed something earlier. She didn't even notice the music. She went to bed early. I stayed up staring at the half-empty wine glass she left behind, the lipstick stain curling against the rim like a goodbye. The next morning, I caught her crying in the car. I was taking out the trash and glanced through the windshield as she sat in the driver's seat. Her head was bowed, her shoulders trembling. She wiped her face fast when she saw me, smiled like it was allergies. But I knew she was breaking apart, and she didn't want me to help her pick up the pieces. Later that weekend, I asked her directly. We were sitting on the porch, watching the dog chew a stick in the yard. The air smelled like cut grass and the end of something. "Are you in love with him?" She looked away, not out of guilt, but calculation. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't even know him." Not really. That hurt more than a yes, because it meant I was losing her to a fantasy dash. Not a man, not flesh and blood, just possibility dash. A promise whispered through a screen. She added quickly, "I haven't done anything. I haven't. I wouldn't cheat." But that word meant nothing to me anymore, because she already had, not with her body, but with her thoughts, her time, her secrets. She gave in the parts of herself I hadn't seen in years. And she left me here, holding the shell of a marriage we'd both stopped feeding. I started sleeping on the couch, not because she asked, not because we fought, but because the bed felt like a coffin. I couldn't sleep next to her without hearing every sigh she made, every turn of the sheets, every tap of her phone screen. The silence between us stretched so wide, I felt like a stranger in my own home. And here's the part nobody tells you. You don't feel like a man when your wife is waiting to leave. You feel like an empty bottle, something poured out, discarded, rattling quietly on the floor. You feel invisible. And when she walks past you, smiling politely like you're just another piece of furniture, you don't get angry. You get scared, because this is how it starts. Not with fire, but with ice. A slow, frozen pull away. And by the time you realize how cold it's gotten, she's already made her plans. She's already halfway out the door. That morning started like any other. The sun had just begun to filter through the curtains, painting long, soft lines across our bedroom floor. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, tying my shoes, trying to convince myself that the day ahead was just another day. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be. Lena was quiet, too quiet. The usual clatter of her morning routine was missing. No humming, no soft footsteps, just a stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. She sat down beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on a spot somewhere beyond the window. For a moment, we just sat there. Then she spoke. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice low and steady. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to reach out, to hold her, to stop whatever was coming. But another part knew this moment had been coming for months, maybe years, and that no amount of holding on would change the truth. She took a deep breath. "It's not working anymore, Daniel." Those words, so simple, so devastating, felt like a blow to the chest. I blinked, trying to find her face in the soft morning light. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice trembling. She looked at me, then really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time in a long time. "I mean us. This marriage. The life we built." I felt a cold wash over me, the kind that seeps into your bones and won't let go. "But why?" "We've been through so much. We have the kids. We have everything." She shook her head slowly, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "No, Daniel. We have things, Dash. We have routines. We have memories. But love? That spark? It's gone. At least for me." I wanted to argue, to tell her that love isn't about sparks, that it's about commitment, about choosing each other every day. But the words caught in my throat. She continued, "There's someone else." The world seemed to tilt. I sat frozen, heart pounding in my ears. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quickly, as if reading my mind. "It started as a conversation, a connection, but it grew. I thought maybe it was just a phase, something to fill the void." Tears welled in her eyes. "But it's not. And I'm scared." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away gently. "This isn't about you being a bad husband, Daniel. It's about me. About what I need that I can't find here anymore." I wanted to scream, to plead, to beg her to stay. But instead, I felt a hollow ache, a profound loneliness that swallowed everything. "Can we fix this?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She looked away, biting her lip. "I don't know. That was the hardest part. Not that she was leaving, not even that she was with someone else, but that the woman I loved had already checked out long before she told me the truth." I sat there for a long time after she left the room, staring at the empty space where she had been. The man I had been was gone. The marriage I thought was unbreakable was cracking in front of my eyes. And I was left wondering what comes next when the person you trusted most no longer wants to stay. The days after Lena's confession felt like walking through fog. Everything was blurry, heavy, and uncertain. I went through the motions at work, at home, but inside, I was unraveling. My mind kept replaying her words, the look in her eyes, the way she said she didn't know if we could fix things. I tried to reach out, to talk, to understand, but each conversation seemed to drift further from the man I once knew and the woman I loved. There was a distance now, a silence loaded with things unsaid. I caught myself watching her, try to read the little tells. Was she hopeful? Regretful? Certain? One afternoon, I sat alone on the couch, the house quiet except for the ticking clock. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. My heart was stuck between two impossible choices: fight for Lena and our life, or let her go and try to heal alone. I thought about the years we had built together, the late-night talks, the family vacations, the laughter and tears. How do you walk away from that? How do you decide that all of that is not enough? But then I remember the nights she was distant, the subtle coldness I dismissed as stress, the dreams she stopped sharing with me. Maybe this had been coming for a while, and I just hadn't seen it. One evening, I finally asked her directly, "Is there anything left between us that's worth fighting for?" She looked at me, weary but honest. "I don't know, Daniel. I want to find out, but I can't promise anything." Her uncertainty hurt more than any rejection. I realized that love isn't always loud or fiery. It can be quiet and fragile, and sometimes it's the will to try one more time that makes all the difference. So I made a choice. Not to give up, not yet. I told her I was willing to go to counseling, to listen, to change, if she was willing to meet me halfway. She hesitated but agreed. That was the first glimmer of hope. But even hope felt fragile, like walking on thin ice. In those days, I also started talking to a few close friends, men who had faced similar storms. Their advice was simple but powerful. Love is a choice, yes, but sometimes love means knowing when to let go, for both people's sake. I didn't know if I was strong enough to make that call yet. For now, I held on to the possibility of us, fragile as it was. But deep inside, I prepared myself for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the hardest part of love is accepting that it might not be enough. Weeks turned into months, and the counseling sessions became a routine, sometimes painful, sometimes revealing. Lena and I sat across from a therapist, unpacking years of silent disappointments, unmet expectations, and dreams we'd lost along the way. Every session peeled back a layer, showing me sides of her and myself I hadn't fully understood. One evening, after a particularly intense session, I found myself alone in the living room. The house was quiet, but my mind was a storm. I realized then that the path ahead was not about fixing her or fixing me, but about understanding what love really meant. Was love enough to keep two people together if the spark had faded? Or was love something bigger, something patient, forgiving, and willing to change? I thought about the man I was when we first met, full of hope and dreams. And the man I was now, wiser, bruised, but still willing to fight for what mattered. Lena walked in and sat beside me, the tension between us softer, the silence no longer heavy, but reflective. "I don't want to lose what we have," she said quietly. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I know we can't keep pretending. We have to be honest, with each other and ourselves." That honesty led to the hardest conversation of all, the one where we acknowledged that love alone might not be enough to fix what's broken. We talked about the possibility of parting ways, not as failures, but as two people who grew apart despite years of love. I felt grief, loss, but also relief. Relief that we were no longer trapped in denial, and that whatever happened next, we would face it with respect and care. In that moment, I made peace with the idea that sometimes loving someone means letting them go, so they can find their happiness, and so you can find yours. Our story didn't end with a dramatic explosion or bitter words. It ended with quiet acceptance, a recognition that life's chapters can close, but the memories and growth remain. And as I looked toward the future, uncertain but hopeful, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was simply a new beginning.